an educator, and she's always teaching. And with this teaching that we're conducting, I'd like to yield to my colleague, the Honorable Joyce Beatty from the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio.
Thank you so much to my colleague, Congressman Dwight Evans, who hails from the 2nd District of Pennsylvania. Thank you for leading us tonight, and thank you to our Congressional Black Caucus Chairman, Cedric Richmond, for allowing us to come tonight. Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues in coming to the floor tonight to mark the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. We have made progress in these past 50 years, but the legacy and example of Dr. King shows us that much remains to be done. Although many marches and protests were met with violence, Dr. King and the women and the men who stood with him, like our very own colleague and Congressional Black Caucus member, Congressman John Lewis. As I listened to Congressman Lewis tonight, as I sat on this House floor and had the privilege and honor to call him a colleague and a friend, it reminded us of his courage and how much more work we have to do. It was through these peaceful protests, it was through their courage, it was through the power of the messages that they sent, that they stood up against the establishment. Dr. King was able to bring the injustices felt by African Americans nationwide to the forefront of American politics. His work culminated in the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where hundreds of thousands of individuals came, all stripes, all communities, and they came for a call to justice and equality for all. It was on that day, on August 28, 1963, when Dr. King gave one of his most powerful and famous speeches, that passionate speech, "I Have a Dream," calling for the end of racism and the expansion of civil rights and economic rights. I am so proud that Mother Beatty's mother, my husband's grandmother, was an invited platform guest witnessing that speech. We have that picture in our office to remind us and to remind our children and grandchildren the power of Dr. Martin Luther King and Congressman John Lewis. With the emotions and the will of the march, it encapsulated in such powerful words, civil rights rose to the top of the agenda of reformers and facilitated the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And still, Mr. Speaker, Dr. King's work was not done. The next year, Dr. King helped to lead the Selma to Montgomery March. How proud I am that I was able to participate in the reenactment of that on its 50th anniversary. The march route spanned some 54 miles from Selma, Alabama to the state capital of Montgomery. The marchers were in response to the southern states' legislatures passing and maintaining discriminatory laws and practices over decades, where it meant to deny, Mr. Speaker, African Americans across the state, across the South, the right to vote. What is our message? What is our message tonight? We are here because we are still walking in it. We are still fighting for civil rights and voting rights and economic rights. We are still fighting for equal pay and for equal work, but we are not afraid. Mr. Lewis led us on this House floor fighting for gun safety. We are not afraid because we are continuing the legacy of Martin Luther King. And lastly, let me just say, we must break this cycle of economic inequality, racism, and poverty. We must stand up to the GOP and to President Trump, because when we look at this tax reform bill, it brings those injustices to economics, inequality, a financial gain. So we are here tonight to say there is still a dream. There is still a stone of hope. And I yield back. And again, I thank my colleague for leading us in this celebration and this tribute to Martin Luther King.